Joining us now, Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, good morning.
Good morning. Happy Easter to everybody.
Same to you.
Happy Easter to you as well. Joe, the Mueller report is the ultimate Washington, D.C. Rorschach test. If you're a Republican, you see no collusion, no obstruction. If you're a Democrat, you see impeachment. And the Democrats today have a conference call planned to debate the Mueller report's implications, with the question of impeachment on the table and the calls for that growing. Do they have anything to hang their hat on as far as impeachment in this report?
Well, impeachment is a political process under the Constitution, which requires high crimes and misdemeanors such as bribery, treason, etc. Now, although many Democrats and many people in the press and many former intelligence officials have accused the president of treason with no basis whatsoever, that doesn't mean that the Congress is incapable, under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi and Elijah Cummings and Jerry Nadler, truly a bunch of lightweights, to do the unthinkable, which is to try and impeach the president. If they do so, they will ensure his reelection, and they will lose the House, and we will increase our seats in the Senate. So there's part of me that wants them to do it, but it's not good for the country. But when have the Democrats ever worried about the good of the country?
Yeah, impeachment. It's amazing that anybody's even discussing it, because you have basically a minority of members in the House who are saying we're going to overturn the will of the people on the basis of what? They haven't even made a clear case, Joe. Yet they're basically saying the words impeachment first and hoping for evidence later.
Yeah, well, you don't have to convince me. I'm certainly in the category that this is a stupid exercise if they undertake it. I think what you see is what happens when hatred for a political figure reaches a fever pitch and then obliterates all reason.
Yeah.
The opposition to the president is probably best reflected by people like Chuck Todd of Meet the Press and NBC News, and I use the word news advisedly. Chuck Todd has become a nut, an absolute nut, an ignoramus, an anti-intellectual fool representing NBC News, but apparently nobody at NBC even cares about that anymore. So, as I've said before, we're in a civil war. At this point, it's nonviolent, and I hope it stays that way. We have the war of ideas, and I call it the war of non-ideas, when there are people like Chuck Todd who actually decline to recognize reality in their discussions. These people still think there was collusion. It's like listening to Clapper say, well, it may not have been active collusion, it may have been passive collusion. Now, you have to be mentally ill to say that.
Now, can I just get your reaction to the Mueller report in total? Because we haven't talked to you since its release. What do you think of how the job that Bob Mueller did and what that report revealed?
I think Bob has embarrassed himself. First of all, it's not the Mueller report. It's the Weissman report. Andrew Weissman is responsible for this, and you can tell because the entire obstruction section, the 200-page Volume 2, is all about Andrew Weissman's bizarre theories of obstruction of justice. Remember, this is the person who, with the consent of the Bush Justice Department, went after people at Arthur Andersen and Enron on a theory of obstruction that the Supreme Court rejected 9-0. This is the kind of brilliant legal thinking that Bob Mueller surrounded himself with. It really doesn't matter what the report says. The report is an embarrassment to federal law enforcement. It's a violation of all DOJ regulations. Bob Mueller is a disgrace. I've known Bob. I like Bob. What he has done in this report is an embarrassment to himself, and it's an embarrassment to the Justice Department. Bill Barr is too nice a guy to say that publicly about Bob Mueller, but this report is a disgrace. Now listen to this. He says he can't prove the president committed crime, but he's not going to exonerate him. Now, let's just think of what that means. That means that you are no longer entitled to the presumption of innocence. That means that you have to prove that you didn't commit a crime. This is sick. And Mueller stayed too long at the fair. Just watching him talk to that NBC reporter outside, he mumbled something about he never comments. I can't wait to watch him testify.
Do you think we're going to see both Mueller and Barr testify? And if so, will it be in an open public setting?
Well, yes, they are both going to testify. Certainly, Bill Barr has agreed to, and at least once or twice, once in the Senate, once in the House, and maybe before different committees. As far as Mueller, he works for the Attorney General. The Attorney General can tell him not to testify. but he is not going to do that. He will allow him to testify, and I hope Bob does testify, because he won't be able to handle it. He couldn't answer a question now if his life depended on it. He stayed too long at the fair. This obviously is the Weissman report. I think this, you know what's really fascinating about this? Andrew Weissman, this will tell you what Weissman thinks of his own work. Instead of going back to the Justice Department, which he was detailed from to work on the Mueller case, he resigned from the Justice Department, is now teaching at a New York law school, and is going to spend most of his time, now get this, on the Innocence Project. He left because he didn't want to be interviewed by the Inspector General about his role in the dossier. Guess what? He's going before a grand jury.
Speaking of the effort to take out Trump, Peter Strzok was removed from the Mueller investigation at one point based on his text messages and the suggestion. This is all based on what Peter Strzok tells us, the suggestion of the appearance of bias in the investigation. Bob Mueller himself has not spoken out about this. And why have we not, even in the wake of the conclusion of the Mueller report, gotten any details about people who had bias towards the president who were removed from the investigation?
Here's the question I have. There are two big questions sitting out there in this very area that you read my mind. Question number one. Mr. Mueller filed a waiver of conflicts after he was appointed. What were those conflicts? We have a right to know. I believe in transparency. I want to know what were the conflicts that Mueller asked for a waiver from the so-called ethics professionals in the Justice Department. That's number one. Number two, Judge Contreras, who sits on the U.S. District Court in D.C., took Michael Flynn's guilty plea and then was forced to recuse himself shortly thereafter. What was the reason for his recusal? Until we get answers to those two questions, everybody involved in this process, including the Chief Justice, Mr. Roberts, gets an incomplete.
Joe, we have a lot more questions for you, so please hang on, and we're going to get to you. We're here with Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, the left is screaming that they want to see all the supporting documents and they want to see the unredacted report. Is William Barr going to give that to them? Are they going to get all the supporting documents? Is everyone in Congress going to be allowed to see that unredacted report, or only select members?
Well, the only way they're going to get to see the completely unredacted report is with a court order allowing grand jury material to be disclosed to non-participants in the grand jury. That's up to the D.C. Circuit. They may grant it, they may not. If the department objects, they will never grant it. If the department doesn't object, they may likely grant it. I don't think they should, but who knows? I mean, obviously, releasing all the underlying information will create, an opportunity for mischief from the Democrats. But they're going to make up stuff even if they don't get what they want. So if you watch Adam Schiff, you see these people are like a bad minstrel show.
You know, speaking of underlying documents and what fed into the investigation in the first place, this dossier prepared by the Clinton campaign is under some new scrutiny from the New York Times, which all of a sudden believes that the information within the dossier may not be true, and that it may actually be the product of Russian misinformation, which is Johnny come lately. Holy cow! The New York Times finally coming around to that idea. How soon will we get a thorough vetting of the dossier and its role in all of this?
Well, that'll be partially in the Michael Horowitz report on the FISA fraud. And let's make no mistake about it. I don't care what Michael Horowitz finds. Absolutely do not care what his facts are and his conclusions. We already know that the 4 FISA applications were fraudulent. Mm-hmm. You could not rely on the dossier. It is a false document, and its author of the 17 memorandums which constitute the so-called dossier, its author, Christopher Steele, testified under oath in a libel case in the UK that he could not verify any of the information. It is not even a close question about the status of the dossier. It was a political document produced for Hillary Clinton, the DNC, by Perkins Coie and Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson and Nellie Orr to smear the President of the United States, create false intelligence to feed back into the United States to get FISA warrants. This is a closed case. For anyone who wants to debate this, they are nuts.
Joe, what do you think about some of the things that have come out where we see there are questions that have come out of the report? For instance, Joseph Mifsud, excuse me, was we now know, according to from the Mueller report, that he lied to the FBI about the timeline of his contact with George Papadopoulos, and yet he has not been charged. George Papadopoulos was charged about lying with his contacts with Joseph Mifsud. So why was one charged and one was not charged? Those are questions that are being asked that are coming up.
Yeah.
Do we ever see the answers to those?
Well, here's the thing about Joseph Mifsud. He was an agent of John Brennan. If he lied to the FBI, he did so with the insistence of John Brennan. The FBI didn't believe Mifsud. They were using him. He's part of the agents of disinformation that were used to create false intelligence to feed back in front of U.S. courts. Mr. Mifsud is in Rome. They know where he lives. If they want to go talk to him, they can send the FBI legal attaché from the office in Rome. I can give you the address and have him go over and interview him. And he will tell them to go to hell. And if I were Mr. Mifsud, I would too. But when all is said and done, this is a John Brennan special. John Brennan created this entire scheme, made sure that it happened, got GCHQ in London to electronically spy on Americans, and Mr. Brennan needs a lawyer. He may need several, actually.
And now, with Bill Barr clearly taking a look at the people who got all of this started, who do you believe should lawyer up first? Who's the first target in all of this?
Oh, I think Brennan and Comey are top of the list. And then there are a series of people clearly Strzok and all those people have to lawyer up. McCabe is already lawyered up. And by the way, I think McCabe's indictment is being postponed because they have other information related to other crimes, which is why he's not being indicted. They may give him a chance to cooperate by giving him a plea deal so he can participate against Brennan. But Comey's going to be a witness against Brennan because those two had conversations about all of this. Top guy, though. This whole scheme started with Brennan. And by the way, don't ever forget this. Remember that Susan Rice memo, January 20th, 2017, for the record, about President Obama knowing all about this, meeting with the intel officials. The question remains now, how many other meetings were there at the White House involving President Obama, the Vice President, Susan Rice, and other people with the intel and law enforcement people about trying to do this stuff against Trump? By the way, I really hope that they declassify all of this stuff. I understand after the Horowitz report, this is all going to be declassified. There are going to be some very, very ugly moments for the Dems and for the Obama people. Let's not even quibble about this. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, knew all about this. He was briefed on it regularly. And in fact, you will recall in March of 2017, when Congressman Nunes went to the White House and looked at the unmasking documents that were in the NSC, that's when he discovered that there had been briefings of the President of the United States by Susan Rice and Ben Rhodes and others. This is only beginning. This is the worst nightmare of the Democrats. If they want to keep this alive, Bill Barr will do his job, and when it's over, Barack Obama, even though the press won't want to talk to him, they won't want to ask him any questions, they won't want to ask him what did he know and when did he know it, Barack Obama, the little guy from Chicago, the baby Jesus, is going to look pretty bad.
Joe, in 30 seconds here, what is the timeline? When do we start to see Bill Barr start to move on some of this?
Oh, he's already doing it now. Okay. I can tell you. I don't know this for a fact, but he's a serious lawyer. When he said he's looking at it to understand it, it's already underway, let me tell you. And by the way, just a quick word about Mitt Romney. He's the phony and the fraud in the United States Senate. He's the new mannequin man replacing John McCain. What a nauseating public figure. Anybody who puts a car elevator in his house is a screwball.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
Bye, guys. Happy Easter.